Hi, Gene Monterastelli here, the editor of tappingqa.com. The video that you are about to watch is a conversation that was a part of this year's 24 Hours of Tapping. The 24 Hours of Tapping is a fundraiser for the amazing work that is done by the Peaceful Heart Network. The Peaceful Heart Network has brought tapping to migrants, refugees, prisoners, and the underprivileged in over 30 countries all over the world. As you watch this video, if you learned something, if you were touched by it, if you were inspired by it, the easiest way to say thank you is to support the work of the Peaceful Heart Network. To do that, all you need to do is go to 24hoursoftapping.com/support. And as you look in the description and the first comment down below, you will see a direct link to that. I hope you enjoy this conversation. We have someone I'm sure you are very, very familiar with. Next, I'd like to share with you Jessica Ortner. Jessica Ortner is a stress reduction expert and one of the leading voices in teaching EFT. She's the producer of The Tapping Solution, the breakthrough documentary film on EFT tapping. She's a New York Times bestselling author of The Tapping Solution for Weight Loss and Body Confidence, based on an online program which has helped over 11,000 women. And in knowing Jessica, it also is something that comes very personally from her own experience in creating health and transformation. And so please welcome to the 24 Hours of Tapping stage, Jessica Ortner, to talk about finding peace in uncertain times. One of the things that I think is really important when having a conversation, when we're giving instruction, is to have clarity of terms. Because you can say, I can say, I love my mother and I love pizza. And those are completely different things, even though I'm using the exact same word. And so when we're having a conversation like this, I always think it's good just define terms. And so when you think of the word peace, how do you define that word as you're thinking about it in the world, in your family, in yourself? When you want to talk about this, what do you mean by peace and that? Yeah.
It's a great question. For me, peace is feeling centered in my body and clear in my mind. It's being
Okay.
able to be really present. So let me tell you the opposite of peace, because I think that
Yeah,
helps also define peace.
absolutely.
The opposite of peace would be overwhelming thoughts, would be a sense of anxiety in our body. And that shows up for people in different ways. Some people feel a pressure in their chest. Other people just feel this mild stomach ache all day. So what I love about tapping and the work we're doing together is that we're not going to be just talking about peace up here, because really we
Mhm.
want to feel peace in here. And that's what makes the biggest difference with how we show up and how we feel.
And so as you say that, the vocabulary that I've used in my own life is being comfortable inside of my own skin.
Yes.
Recognizing the fact that there are lots of things in my life that I do not have control of, and some of them are hard, and some of them are easy, and some of them are unpredictable. But being here in this meat suit in a way that I'm comfortable allows me to respond to that in a useful, thoughtful way that's proportionate, that's well informed, that I'm not abandoning my emotions, but they're not overrunning me as I'm engaging with what's going on.
Exactly.
And so, you gave some of the, just some of the physical experiences, but sometimes we don't know what we don't know, or we're not thinking about it because it's a normative experience. If
Yes.
you were just going to ask someone okay, let's figure out how comfortable in your own skin, how peaceful are you at this point? What are the things that you'd be having people check into instead of just you listed some symptoms, but if I was going to try and do some diagnostic to go, how much peace am I actually experiencing? What would that look like for you?
It's such a tricky thing to measure, because I remember the first time I experienced tapping, I had such a shift that I felt like I had taken off this massive backpack, this weight, really a backpack.
Hmm.
I was front facing, because it really was this feeling in my chest. And when I let go of that anxiety, I felt a little off balance for a moment. And I
Right.
just remember taking a deep breath and going, I did not realize how anxious I was, because
Mm,
so often we've just become so stress is normalized, pressure is
right.
normalized. And so it's hard for us to even tap in, how stressed am I? Because we are so good at ignoring it and moving forward that oftentimes if we don't have the experience with tapping where we do something where we communicate with our body, we won't feel the shift and then notice, oh my goodness, I can't believe what I was holding on to. I think a mistake people make sometimes with tapping is they try to start by overanalyzing themselves, trying to think of, well, what's the root cause, or how stressed do I really feel? And there's a place for a reflection always, but I find it's very helpful to just start where you are, because when you are feeling overwhelmed, it's hard for you to even communicate with yourself. It's hard for you to find the words. It's hard for you to find the clarity. It's almost after you have an experience, even, and we can do something right now, even just let me come back to this moment. Let me relax my body. Let me quiet my mind, because then different answers come up. Usually, I'll be tapping with someone or even with myself, someone's upset and they'll say something like, oh, I'm so upset because I read this thing in the news today. And then you start doing some tapping. And though that might be true, suddenly they go, well, this reminds me of how powerless I've been feeling lately.
Right.
And so it's nothing to do.
Yeah.
I mean, the actual event has a component, but that's not really what's causing the ability for one person to read something and think, I'm going to make a difference, and another person to read something and go, I am powerless. It's all how we interpret what's going on in the world. And the best thing that we can do is just start with relaxing our body and feeling a little more at peace, a little more at home, even before we figured anything out or gotten any clarity on anything.
And I love what you're saying there, like, because for many of us, when we're taught tapping by a good tapping instructor, like, you need to be as specific as possible. And it's really easy to interpret, you need to be as specific as possible as I must be specific. And sometimes, yes, and sometimes as specific as possible as I feel constriction in my chest. Yes. And that's it. And I don't know the root cause, and I don't know what I'm thinking, and I don't know what's going on. And like you said, as I do a little tapping on that particular piece, all of a sudden it's like, oh, what's underneath this is. And then I do a little more tapping. Oh, what's underneath this is. Oh, what underneath this is. And so, like, for me, like, the framework that I'm always using is like, where is the door or the window that I can climb in? And that's all I'm looking for at this particular point, is what is the simplest, smallest entry point that I can have so we can start to do that. I can remember like when I first started tapping, like the way they looked at it was like, take a deep breath, 0 to 10. How big is the deep breath? Awesome. Let's do a round of tapping. Take a deep breath. How big is the deep breath now? And just something simple and subtle in that way. You're about to say?
Yeah. So we have an app, the Tapping Solution, and it's been really fun to experiment with what really resonates with people. And I created this series because I wanted it for myself, feeling off. Sometimes we just feel off. We just feel blah. You can just tap on, I feel off and I don't know why, or I'm feeling grumpy because everything's bothering me. I can't pinpoint. My kids are driving me crazy. When we're feeling off, everything can feel like a trigger. And so just starting with, even though I'm feeling off, like, I choose to come back into my body. I choose to slow down. And Jean, if you're up for it, I want to continue the conversation, but I'd love to start there. I'd love to just do
let's do it.
Quick
Absolutely. Let's do some tapping.
For those who are watching. So, I think all of us can just tap in and notice if anything just feels a little off. And we're just going to start there. If you want to give it a number, you can, but just notice in your body anything that feels off. And we're going to tap on the side of the hand. Now, everyone might be feeling great because they've been tapping along for hours with you. But if, even if this doesn't resonate, still tap along, because you're going to get benefits from this. So repeat after me, Jean, if you don't mind. Even though I'm feeling off.
Even though I'm feeling off.
And I don't know why.
And I don't know why.
I acknowledge how I feel.
I acknowledge how I feel.
And I give my body permission to relax.
And I give my body permission to relax.
Even though I've been struggling.
Even though I've been struggling.
And I don't have all of the answers.
And I don't have all the answers.
I'm open to the idea.
I'm open to the idea.
That I can feel more at peace.
That I can feel more at peace.
Even within this uncertainty.
Even within this uncertainty.
Even though I've been hard on myself.
Even though I've been hard on myself,
trying to figure out exactly what's wrong,
trying to figure out exactly what's wrong,
I choose self-compassion,
I choose self-compassion,
and I'm open to experiencing more ease.
and I'm open to experiencing more ease.
So on the eyebrow point, we're just going to give a quick voice to this feeling. Feeling off.
Feeling off.
Side of the eye, not feeling like myself.
Not feeling like myself.
Under the eye, and I don't exactly know why.
And I don't exactly know why.
Under the nose, sometimes I feel grumpy.
Sometimes I feel grumpy.
Under the mouth, sometimes I'm irritable.
Sometimes I'm irritable.
Collarbone, because of other people or circumstances.
Because of other people or circumstances.
Under the arm, I wish people would just figure things out.
I wish people would just figure things out.
Top of the head, I wish the world would just change.
I wish the world would just change.
Eyebrow, I recognize this anxiety.
I recognize this anxiety.
Side of the eye, I recognize this pressure.
I recognize this pressure.
Under the eye, and I'm open to letting it go.
And I'm open to letting it go.
Under the nose, even though I don't have all of the answers.
Even though I don't have all of the answers.
Under the mouth, even though I don't know exactly what's wrong.
Even though I don't know exactly what's wrong.
On collarbone point, I choose to lean into compassion.
I choose to lean into compassion.
Under the arm, and to slow down.
And to slow down.
Top of the head, right now and right here.
Right now and right here.
Eyebrow, I am okay.
I am okay.
Side of the eye, even in this crazy world.
Even in this crazy world.
Under the eye, I choose to go within.
I choose to go within.
Under the nose, and find my center.
And find my center.
Under the mouth, even before anything changes.
Even before anything changes.
Collarbone, I choose more peace now.
I choose more peace now.
Under the arm, relaxing my body and mind.
Relaxing my body and mind.
Top of the head, feeling more centered and at ease.
Feeling more centered and at ease.
All right, and now just take a nice deep breath in. I like to shake out my shoulders sometimes and just check in and notice if you feel any change in your body. I feel like more open in my chest. Sometimes I feel like I am a bit constricted, and then it's easier to take a nice deep breath after tapping. So that just shows how simple it can be.
Yeah. And one thing I really want to underline what you did there at the beginning, you used the word acknowledge. I think of the work of, the hypnotist Milton Erickson, who always said that all transformation starts by stating what is. And the way that shows up, I recognize the fact, like just even simpler language than acknowledgement. But I think that is so super important for us to give us permission to acknowledge where we are. You were talking earlier about this idea that we just feel like stress is a way of life, so much so a friend of mine who wanted to do work with stress management, and he found that people were only taking stress assessments to prove to themselves that they were stressed because they were convinced it is just the baseline. That's what the world is. That just can't change. And just giving ourselves permission to acknowledge this is what I'm experiencing right now, even if it might be a baseline thing. By giving myself permission to acknowledge it, what's going on, I immediately soften my relationship to that thing. I acknowledge the past. I'm really stressed right now. Oh, and that relaxes.
Yeah. There's two components that always create stress, which is a lack of control and uncertainty. I'll say again, lack of control and uncertainty. This is about finding peace in an uncertain world. The world is not more uncertain now than it was 10 years ago. It's always been uncertain.
Right.
We look at generations. I always think about my grandmother who was in World War II in the Royal Air Force. There is, we've lived through generations of uncertainty, but now it feels a little bit more heightened because we have these computers in our hand where we're constantly seeing uncertainty, and we want to click it and we want to see, and we're constantly seeing a lack of control, experiencing a lack of control.
Right.
And there's nothing we can do about the outside world in the moment. And one of the biggest misconceptions around peace is I will feel peace when my siblings stop fighting, my mother-in-law stops doing this, when my finances are finally better in line. So we have these rules around I will feel peace when, and we create this outside experience. And then we hold on to this level of stress because we have this lack of control because we can't control other people. And we have this uncertainty because nobody has this crystal ball. And so what's the antidote to that? Well, we have to begin to find certainty within ourselves. We have to begin to acknowledge what we can control and to begin to focus on how we can show up for the world and how we can show up for ourselves. And so if we're moving from anxiety to peace, it has to start with our internal reality and going in and saying, I'm certain in my worth. I'm certain in who I am. You might find ways to judge yourself and criticize yourself, but I can tell you, I'm 100% sure that the people showing up here have big hearts. And if all you're doing is, I am certain in my good intentions and my big heart. That's all that I'm certain about. I'm not perfect. I have my flaws. I have my insecurities, but I'm certain that I have a big heart. Then we really want to latch on to that certainty. We want to even tap it in to remind ourselves of who we are. And once we do that within, we're able to express it without. We're able to impact the world in a better way. But we have to build certainty and control within ourselves. And the more that we look out of the outside world, it's just this recipe of always feeling powerless, always feeling not enough. So that's why a practice like tapping or showing up for an experience like this is really essential if we want to make a profound change in our life.
And it's interesting you're saying that, like, how emotionally liberating it can be acknowledging the things that I don't control. Because the
Yeah.
moment I am acknowledge the things I don't control, I no longer spending time or energy trying to control something that is uncontrollable and going to the place of what do I control? Years ago, I was at a Spanish and flamenco school in the south of Spain. And after our first day of class, we go out for drinks with fellow students. And one of the women who had come along, my friend Jennifer, ended up there last minute. It wasn't something that she was planning on doing. Didn't speak Spanish, never been in a dance class before. And we're in this bar, and she's literally taking all the breadcrumbs on our bar top, and she's making them into a little pile. And I go, let me guess, that's the only thing in the universe you control right now. And she's like, yeah. And she just went right back to it. And literally was like starting from the simplest place inside out, what is right in front of me on the bar. I'm going to clean this up. That is something I can control. Now the world is a little bit more manageable. And
Yes.
by starting from this place of, and I love what you're saying there about this idea of peace. Peace is not a circumstance or a place I visit. Peace is how I am in response to what is going on around me. And like, that's super, like, it's super empowering because that's the thing I actually have the most control over. I have the least control over my environment and what the other 8 billion people on this planet are doing. I have the most control over the thoughts that I'm having, how I'm responding to those thoughts, what I'm feeling in my body, how I respond to those things. And so even though it feels like I'm making it smaller because all I can control is me, I hear what you're saying is super, super empowering because it's pointing to what I actually can control. You know, I can't,
Right.
the old man shouting at cloud. I can't control the weather, but I can control how I'm responding to the rain.
Right. And sometimes even though we intellectually understand that, we block ourselves because we have this belief that if I don't have anxiety and if I'm not panicking, two things will happen. Change won't happen because I need the panic to make change. The other misconception is if I don't panic, it means I don't care. So if I'm not stressing about what's happening with this friend, it means I don't care about them. And two things happen when we're in that state of stress. It's tricky because it does create adrenaline. And so when we're feeling stressed or pressure, it works. You know, it's like everyone knows that feeling of starting a diet. And they're just like, all right, I'm ready to start a diet. I'm ready to lose weight. And it's like this stress and this pressure, I'm going to do it. And then for a little while, you're making great choices. And then because it's all based on stress, there comes a point where we sabotage ourselves because we're tired, it's too hard, and we go back to unhealthy habits. And so we have to realize that we're running this pattern of panic, that we trick ourselves to think, well, like if I don't panic, then I won't make changes. And I've been living with this panic so long. So if I'm peaceful, then I'm just going to be lazy and I'm not going to be helping the world. And it means I'm selfish and I don't care. That's one of the biggest myths. And it couldn't be further from the truth, because when we are feeling this stress, it's like this hamster wheel. We're just going in circles. We're running really fast. So we feel like, okay, maybe I'm doing something, but we're just running in place. What the world needs and what we need is creativity, innovation, ideas. And those things happen when we're relaxed. Albert Einstein said that he would get his best ideas when he was shaving. I don't think it was the shaving cream. It's the act of being in the moment and relaxing and doing something. We experience it when we go for a walk, when we take a shower, but we don't have enough of those moments. And tapping helps us create those moments so we can release the stress and get those ideas, that inspiration. Doesn't mean it hits right away, but we create space to be able to listen to the whisper of our intuition. And that's impossible if we're constantly trying to change things and control things and fight. So what I invite people to do or to think about throughout your day, excuse me, is notice next time you want to make a change. Notice if that pressure begins to build. Notice if you can begin to move that pressure and move towards right here and right now, I'm safe and I'm open to inspiration. I'm open to the ideas coming, and give yourself that space to hear the whispers of that wisdom, because those ideas you can't hear them when we're stressed and when we're panicked. We only hear them when we silence that anxiety.
And as you mentioning the Einstein shaving thing, recently I actually did a study. They were talking to a bunch of scientists who were saying, I get all my best ideas in the shower, and they were trying to figure out what was going on. And what they found is when we are consciously attentive to a task that is menial, it frees up that space. Washing my hair, shaving, folding laundry, going for a walk, that what we're doing is, because our attention is on something small that we're managing, we're turning that stress down, which allows that creativity to come through. And so there's not only is it anecdotal, they've started to show that this is what's going on. The other thing that for me, we were talking about that relationship to, I only care if I'm engaged stressfully, or I'm only going to move forward when I'm moving stressfully. My relationship to that changed when I learned the word eustress, eustress. And eustress is the opposite of distress. So that Christmas Eve feeling, me, when I'm about to step on stage and I'm really, really well prepared and I can't wait to share something, that excitement is not debilitating the way distress is, but it puts us in that creative, open, hopeful spaces. My favorite disposition in the world is if I can live in a state of curiosity, even when things are going wrong, I'm not overwhelmed by them. I'm not stressed by them. That's curious. How do we get our way out of this one this time? And being able to engage with it in that way. And so I love the way that you have named, sometimes we think we have to have the stress to show up in the way that we want to, and reframing and giving ourselves the ability to unplug that story and recognize, oh no, actually we think less well, we are less responsive, we are more rigid when we're in that biochemical state, and that we're actually more helpful, we're a better friend, we're more creative when we don't live in that place. And so letting go of that story, like you're saying, is so super valuable as we engage with this.
Yeah, exactly. We have to almost meet ourselves again. I think I came out of the womb anxious, Jean. I don't know what happened, but my brothers always comment that I have such a crazy memory. I can remember every detail of our childhood. And when I was looking back, I was like, oh, I remember, because I had so much anxiety that it was I was always at this peak state.
Right.
I think it was, I had trouble reading. I had a speech impediment. I was born in a different country and immigrated as a child. I don't know what it was, but honestly,
Right.
like I feel like I was born, people are born different ways. My
Mhm.
husband, I think he was born Zen. He just has a different level. His set point is different than mine.
Yep.
So when I began to use tapping, I had to re-meet myself. Who is Jessica without the anxiety?
Mhm.
Right? How does she show up? And also know that being someone who is so sensitive, I do have to do more work than maybe my husband has to do
Yep.
when it comes to bringing the state of peace, that it's a practice. And it's not a place that you arrive to. That's the biggest misconception that I had with life. I always was like, I can't wait for my life to really begin. Like, once
Mhm.
I get this all figured out, then it really starts. Then I'll find myself. Then I'll have the career I want and the body that I want. And it was always this waiting for this utopic moment when I was healed. And so
Yeah.
self development and doing things around healing was all about arriving to this future that I felt like, things would click into place.
Yeah.
And I experienced such freedom when I realized there is no place. There is no place where everything suddenly feels easy and you don't have a single doubt. But what happens is when you meet yourself every day and experience more peace, your stress set point changes. So, and it takes time and it takes repetition. What stressed me out 10 years ago does not faze me now because of the years of work that I've done. And I have to keep doing it, because if I drop these practices, I will go back to what I was so
Yeah.
good and wired to. I read something the other day that was like, you can't unpickle a cucumber. Once a
Yeah.
cucumber is pickled, that's it. And so once you have an addictive behavior, my addictive behavior was anxiety. You can't unpickle that. That's what it is. So you have to learn tools to move away from that. If you're addicted to social media, to anything, even when you're dealing with drugs and alcohol, you often hear people say in AA that idea of like, this is something that is a lifelong path. Sobriety is not I'm sober and then it's over.
Yeah.
So, some people can hear that and go, oh, that doesn't sound that great. But it's actually incredibly empowering, because you don't have to wait for your life to begin. You don't have to wait for things to line up to be joyful or to experience peace. It's those little moments that you choose every day, and just celebrating the fact that for 10 minutes you weren't stressed. That's enough to start to train your brain to make peace in an easier place to arrive to. And it's a daily practice, the same way you don't shower once, you don't clean your house once and go, great, my house is clean, I'm done. It's this practice of showing up for yourself again and again.
I spent an entire calendar year with a little pink eraser in my pocket. And the reminder of that pink eraser every single time I touched it was, my work is only to let go of the thing that is unuseful right now.
Yeah, I love
And that
that.
stress and that anxiety, and just like, okay, what's the thing that is unuseful that I can just let go of? And it's not a going somewhere else, and it's not replacing it with something else, because I'm sufficient and I'm enough, and I've created stories that make it hard for me to recognize that and not interpret the world in that way. The other thing I think is really valuable in what you're saying there is, and I'm so happy, as a tapping community, we have lost the vocabulary of one session miracles and 1 minute miracles.
Mm.
And I am 100% open to instantaneous transformation of deep things. I've seen that in my own life. I've seen that in clients I've worked with, but that is an unreasonable standard for the way that we create transformation. Like the way that you talk about, this is a regular practice of, you know, the emotional response. I can have an habitual emotional response. This
Mm.
comes up, my body just goes into the biochemical state the exact same way. I used to have this zero gravity chair for your back that I used to do my self hypnosis in, and I literally could look at it and my entire body would relax, because it's like,
Right.
oh, that's the place of relaxation. Where the exact same thing is, I could hear someone's voice, I could see my bank book, I could whatever, and my emotional response is the habitual stress. And
Yeah.
to recognize it's just about creating the new habit of gently letting go and letting go and letting go. And I think the other thing that happens inside of that is, like you very clearly said, the things that stressed me out 10 years ago don't stress me out today. And that's part of evolution. But sometimes what can happen in that particular process is I then notice the new stressors I have in my life. And so I'm forgetting about that decade of change that you were talking about, where things used to cause me
Right.
problems
Yes.
because stress is still in my life. So apparently my personal development work isn't working because stress is still in my life. But, before I was afraid to speak up in work, now I'm comfortable in front of 100 people, but boy, I'm still afraid to speak in front of 1,000 people. Like, I'm not recognizing how much
Totally.
bigger and expansive is going on. And so, like, to hear you being able to recognize this is evolving and I'm better than I once was, it's so easy for us to miss that in our own transformational journey.
Oh yeah. And even like with that new perspective, the thing that tapping does is it disconnects us from the kind of the stuckness, the part of that emotion, so we can have some perspective that we couldn't have
Yeah.
before. And so I noticed that, I wrote a book about weight loss and body confidence, and ever since I started my first diet when I was 14 and always was fluctuating, always blaming my body, always felt like not enough. And I would do this thing where if something didn't work out, or if a boy didn't like me, or if I didn't get a certain opportunity, I would blame my body. And
Mhm.
it's interesting because as I began to tap and begin to let go of that story, I would notice that my mind would still like sometimes go to that place, but I was aware of it now. Like I could see it
Mhm.
happening. Before I couldn't witness it, it just was happening. And another step of my transition was going, oh, this is what I do when I'm scared. Oh, honey,
Mm.
this is what you do when you need to slow down and you need a little self-care. And so instead of going, oh my God, I'm back to that pattern. Oh my goodness, I can't believe all that work didn't work. I could witness it and go, oh, baby girl, this is the thing that you do when you're
Yeah.
scared. All right, so how can we address that fear? How can we share a little more love? And it's that perspective that makes all the difference. So I'm not scared of those voices anymore. I'm not scared of that thought pattern because I can see it and you can just go, oh, okay, you're
Yeah.
scared.
And
It's tough.
it yeah, because it was a tool. It was a
Yeah.
tool that was useful. And one of the things that also is really, really hard when we're looking at those tools and we're letting go of them is some of those tools actually were useful at one point in our life.
Mhm.
The playing small and hiding, if I was in a house with a disruptive parent, might have been the way that I survived.
Yeah.
And I say that literally, like, get out of the, I'm sure you've worked with clients as well, where they have been in life-threatening circumstances when they didn't have a lot of agency. And so they were super creative and they were adaptive to solve that particular problem. It was a tool to solve the problem. I'm now a different person at a different age with a different set of agency and all of that sort of stuff. And so now it's the right tool in the wrong context. It's a
Mhm.
tool that once was useful that is no longer useful for me. And so for me, like what you're talking about there, like that self-compassion that you're having, like, oh, like Marie, it's all little pumpkin whenever I'm thinking that little younger
Yeah.
toe-haired version of me. But like recognizing it's like, I'm just trying to do something that is functional, and choosing the anxiety, choosing the stress, choosing the eating, choosing the self-flagellation is just a tool that what we're doing is we're just transforming the tools that we reach for, or when we reach for the tools, or how we reach for those particular tools. That for me, it makes it so much easier to have some self-compassion about what's going on. It's not that I'm failing, it's I'm trying to solve a problem. I'm just not doing it in a helpful or healthful way at this particular moment.
Yeah. I remember it was over 10 years ago. I was interviewing Brad Yates, and he said this quote, and I use it all the time, which is self-sabotage is simply misguided self-love. That changed
Yeah.
everything for me, because then I
Yeah.
could look at the places I was sabotaging myself and go, okay, it's misguided self-love. So is it because I need a break? Am I sabotaging
Right.
myself because it feels overwhelming? Am I sabotaging myself because I'm scared? I'm doing
Mm.
it as a way to protect myself. And so suddenly I'm not broken anymore. I just have
Yeah.
these tools that aren't really helping this grown up, more resourceful adult, which helped me in the
Yeah.
past. But there's a level of compassion when you realize, oh, there's nothing broken or wrong with me. I just have outdated tools.
Yeah. one of my favorite questions to ask clients when they're struggling with something where there's just kind of like this like data dump of everything that's going on, emotional and tactical and whatever. And I'm like, great. So what's the problem you're trying to solve? And oftentimes they're going to go, okay, yeah. And so when one of these emotions come up, asking the question, okay, I feel stressed. What's the problem that the stress is trying to solve? And
Yeah.
so all of a sudden, I am not wrestling with this thing. One of the very first episodes of the podcast I did 16 years ago was called How Do We Make Our Issues Our Allies? Because this stress is an ally. It's just misinformed or it's using the wrong tactic, but it just wants me to be safe and it wants me to be healthy. And when I'm able to start to change my relationship to my emotional response to what's going on of, oh, I can't believe I failed again because I cleaned out the pint of cookies and cream ice cream, just to give a random example that has nothing to do with my own personal life. But just to be in that circumstance, go, okay, what's the problem I'm trying to solve there? And it gives us this new set of, like you said, compassion towards ourselves and the actions that we're taking, which makes it so much easier because it's really hard for me to create transformation when I'm beating myself up. It's so
Yeah.
much easier for me to create healing when I'm starting from this place of gentleness and compassion towards myself and the incompetency of the tool that I happen to be choosing in the moment.
Yeah. And the biggest irony of life is that the obstacle is the way. There's this great book by a friend
Yeah.
of mine, Ryan Holiday. He writes about Stoicism. He has many books, but one of them is called The Obstacle is the Way. And Marcus Aurelius and other Stoics talk about oftentimes your obstacle is the way forward. It's actually exactly what you need to evolve and be of service in this world. When I had a podcast, I don't have a podcast anymore, but I used to end my podcast with what is one thing that at the time was really difficult and ended up being the biggest blessing. Every time, every big expert, everyone I respected would share this big obstacle that if it didn't happen, they wouldn't be changing people's lives. They wouldn't be the parent that they want to do. They wouldn't have met the love of their life. Often the obstacle is the way. It is our ability to grow and evolve. And that's what we came here for, to experience being human, to experience our power. And so when we allow ourselves to entertain this idea, the obstacle is the way, we can begin to see this obstacle of what's the blessing? What's the teaching? How is this thing that I'm struggling with is exactly what I need for me to find my power. Because if you don't have the contrast of night, you don't experience the beauty of day. We have to have contrast in our lives. And when we can appreciate that contrast, we can appreciate the struggle, we can move forward and use it to our advantage.
And I love that question so much that when things are going wrong in my life, I will ask myself the question, okay, 3 years from now, what has to happen for me to look back at this moment right now and think it's the best thing that ever happened to me? So instead of just
Yeah.
using it reflectively, and I don't know what's going to happen, but what it does is it, even if I don't end up in that place, and even if it doesn't turning out that way, in the moment, it gives me the ability to start reframing, because we all have those moments where it felt like it was the worst thing in the world. And in hindsight, it became this real blessing, or it created a path for us to create something new. That I'm to the point that in the moment when things are chaotic and going sideways, to go, okay, great. 3 years from now, why is this the best thing that will ever happen to me? And even if I can't answer the question, I start to go, okay, just because it's bad doesn't mean it's always going to be bad. And it just, it just takes a little bit of the edge of the anxiety off, even if it doesn't make it all go away in that particular moment.
Exactly. We have to have that faith to take the next step. There's a quote by Steve Jobs. I'm absolutely going to butcher it and I'm paraphrasing, but he says something like, when we look back in our lives, we can begin to connect the dots. And all of us can do that. We can look back at struggles and begin to connect the dots and see how it led us to where we are now. But in the moment, we can't do that. So we have to have faith that one day we'll be able to look back and connect those dots and see that it was exactly what needed to happen to bring us where we want it to be.
That's awesome. Excellent. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for your time and your lived experience and your wisdom. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. I really appreciate you.
If you found this interview inspiring, I would encourage you to support the Peaceful Heart Network by going to 24hoursoftapping.com/support or clicking the link in the description. And you will see on the screen right now a playlist to all of the interviews from this year's and last year's 24 Hours of Tapping. I hope you enjoyed those as well.